Fabulous. So, welcome everyone to the Sales Tuesdays podcast. I am super excited to be here with you today and excited to talk about the topic qualifying and understanding customer needs. And just really thrilled. It's a treat to have Brad Griffith here of Buckeye Innovation as our featured guest. So, a little bit about Brad. You are the president and founder of Buckeye Innovation, which I believe that to be true. We go back to the olden days
Long time.
when you were just in a one room office. Is this right? And I believe there was
Absolutely.
maybe like two or three people piled up into that tiny space at the Dublin Entrepreneurial
Right.
Center.
Your memory is correct. We would spend a lot of time over at the deck or my first real office outside my house was in New Albany, their New Albany Business Development Center at the time. And at first I even just had a cubicle and I hired my
Oh,
first
okay.
intern with just a cubicle. And I thought, well, shoot, the two of us shouldn't sit in a cubicle together. And so
Especially
got an
post-COVID
office.
now, like that's definitely
Oh,
not something we
yeah.
would recommend.
That was a different time. That was a different time. There
But
were no
so you've
infectious
grown
diseases back then.
from a cubicle, well, you've grown from a home office to a cubicle with an intern to like a one-room office to
Right.
multi-room. And now you are how many, like where are you at in terms of space and or people?
Yeah, so I guess full circle, I'm back to my home office. We work
Ah,
remotely now, so we've got a team of 16 full-time people, all full-time employees. We span seven different states. There are 10 of us here in Ohio, and then
oh,
six.
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, one each in six other states. Super inefficient. The topic of today is not HR and operations, but super inefficient way to hire one person in each of six states
Mm,
because then you got to
mm,
file taxes in all those states. But it's nice
mm.
having people who are spread out. We have some clients spread out. We've got people in three different time zones now. So,
That's amazing.
yeah,
Well, I mean, just also being an Accelerate Columbus ESO, it's so great for businesses to, just hear about that evolution, right? And
yeah,
understand how it happens. Because frequently people don't always have that longevity of business
right,
relationships. And if you're just emerging as a business owner, like it looks like people have arrived. Like, oh, they've arrived, they've got their space, they've got their building, they've got their
yeah,
storefront, and you don't always get to hear the evolution behind
right.
that. Now, Brad, you're born into an entrepreneurial family. You're raising your two kids to be entrepreneurs, from what I understand. And you built your first website from an Animal Farm book report in sixth grade because you felt like PowerPoint was basically passe and it was not impressing teachers any longer. Is that
Right,
correct?
right, right. I wanted something cutting edge enough that teachers would just give me an A. It didn't really matter what content was in the presentation. And it didn't work with the PowerPoint. So yeah, went to a nice old frames-based website for those who remember the navigation frame that scrolled separately from the main
Oh,
content
nice.
frame.
Okay.
It's actually
And
it is still available. Go to bradgriffith.com. You can see my first personal website, and there's a link to Animal Farm where you can look at the Animal Farm
oh,
website too.
okay. All right. You know what? We are gonna make note of that and see if we can get a little
Yeah.
edit of that in there.
Make sure you're sitting down though.
Um,
Yeah, it's
well, I
painful.
mean, it was sixth grade, but the other
Right.
thing you
It's been a
probably were
while.
able to like lean in on is that teachers also didn't really know what they were looking at either. They were like,
Right.
I don't know what this is, but it looks
Yeah.
like he put a lot of work in on
Yeah.
this.
That's what I was
Um,
going for. Yeah.
So, like a true Buckeye, attended the Ohio State University with electrical and computer engineering, and then also returned for your MBA to round out your background. And so, I'd love to hear a little bit first. What is Buckeye Innovation? Because that sounds vague. It feels like
Sure.
there's probably more behind that. And then, what is your earliest sales memory? So first, give us an overview of what
Yeah.
Buckeye
Good
Innovation is.
question. So some people will still remember us as Buckeye Interactive, and we operated. And I think when you and I met, we were operating as Buckeye Interactive at the
Hmm.
time. Buckeye Innovation LLC is our formal legal entity and always has been. But a few years ago, we shifted away from the focus on Buckeye Interactive sounds more like an interactive marketing or a digital marketing firm.
Hmm.
And like
Hmm.
that's all that we do. We really, I would consider us more of a software innovation team. We design and develop applications, web apps, mobile apps, also marketing sites and e-commerce sites that help businesses and organizations to grow and grow more effectively. So what we target these days with Buckeye Innovation, we are working with mostly equitable access organizations. So Accelerate Columbus is fantastic. What the city of Columbus is doing, they have found an equity gap somewhere that one group of people, or I mean, you could group it in a lot of different ways, but one group of people has more access to growth, business growth resources than other groups of people do. And so they are targeting in Central Ohio specifically, just the matter of being in Central Ohio versus New York, Chicago, Bay Area, that changes some of the investment landscape and some of the resources you have. So our team works with organizations that have found some sort of an equity gap. That's usually a resource gap, an opportunity gap. It could be an information gap. And they're trying to close that gap. And so these are typically nonprofit organizations, local governments, and we build technology that enhances their capacity, helps them to close those gaps more effectively. We find those projects super fulfilling. We also do work for some for-profit businesses, but it's the projects where we get to make a real impact on our communities that really are the most fulfilling to us. And entrepreneurs make a huge impact on the communities. That's why Accelerate Columbus, I think, is one of our favorite projects because we
Oh.
get to work with growing innovative businesses who may be first generation entrepreneurs, they're female owned businesses, minority owned businesses. They're here in the Midwest rather than those big cities. It's very much mission aligned for us, and I'm excited to be a part of that.
I love that from a market and an industry drill down, right? In terms of really
Yeah,
distinguishing yourself amongst the market and amongst other competitors that
yeah,
create software applications and programs and whatnot. Because, you know, to be frank, there's plenty of them out there, right? And,
right,
you know, you've always got to come up with how you're going to distinguish yourself. And there's
right.
plenty of organizations that say, yeah, we do the same thing. We have similar types of clients. But when you start kind of drilling down into that market and talking about equity gap and then the types of organizations that do that, and also thinking about what it means to work with those organizations, how they are differently situated in the country, in the company, within a particular landscape, within a community, and in terms of capacity as well. Like it really, I mean, just I just love again, just like the drill down around the specificity, because I think it's
It's,
really easy for people to be like, yes, we do this, but there's no kind of
yeah,
like what's distinct about the customers that you serve and then the products and services that you
yeah.
serve them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's super important to find that niche that you can serve, preferably one that you cater your whole business, all of your processes and everything around that type of client. And so we've optimized all of our processes around these growing innovative organizations that really they need something different than what most freelancers or most bigger agencies would provide. And so all of our products and services, everything that we do when we take on a custom design project, we are optimized for someone who needs really high quality services, but just a small amount of them. And so we
Hmm.
can do a smaller project, but do very high quality work, and we can do a lot of those projects. Most companies like ours are not set up for that, and it
I've
doesn't make sense for
never,
them.
yeah, I've never heard of anybody set up for that. So
Yeah,
congratulations. Because
thanks.
it's still working, right? And I
Yeah,
remember,
yeah, I think it is.
you know, like this is a little piece of Brad and Erica history here as we walk down memory lane. Because when we worked together, when I was doing an event here in Central Ohio with Venture for America, and
Hmm.
we were at Capital University, and I want to say, you know, logos appearing on screen was like BI, Capital, maybe City of Columbus, Rev One, and you really like dorked out at that moment. You were like,
Yeah,
oh, it really warms my heart to
you
see,
remember that? Yeah,
yes, to see the BI logo
yeah,
up there amongst all of those like community partners that are
yeah.
actively engaged in, you know, creating
Right.
opportunities. So I love
And look at us, we
that.
both have ESOs now serving organizations, and we're up there with the city of Columbus. So yeah,
I know. Well, it's definitely
it's
been a
fun being there.
professional goal of mine. So
Yeah,
I'm super
yeah,
excited to be in such good company. So
yeah.
walk us a little bit through your Accelerate Columbus program because it feels
Sure,
like it's a
sure.
little bit different. And I feel like the the small business ESOs, right? Our kind of programming is a little bit different, I think, and
Mhm.
that's something to kind of bring out is I feel like the ESOs that are also small businesses versus some that are maybe anchor entrepreneurial support organizations
Yeah,
have some distinction in the type of programming, which is great because the city of Columbus has really sort of identified kind of post startup as the space that they want to operate in. So I
yeah,
love that there's kind of both sides of the coin. So tell us a little bit about your program and how it
sure.
works.
Sure. And can I weave in a bit of, I know I didn't directly answer your question about favorite sales or first sales
Oh no, yeah,
memory.
that's right. No,
Um,
please.
so I'll weave a little bit of that in. So, uh, I think when you're starting a business, it started just me. It was just me in my home office, and I very gradually grew. And like you said, Erica, there was someone one time I was on the panel. This was, I think it was last year, maybe 2 years ago. Someone on a panel, or while I was on the panel, they asked me, Brad, so when had you like reached that time when you just made it? Like you felt like, finally I'm there. I have arrived. I am a successful business owner. And I said, that presupposes that I am at that point, that I've made it and I like it's all smooth sailing from here. And so people always think about like when you have a growth path. I say, it was just me, and then it was when Erica met me, we were up to three people, and then we added a few more and a few more, and it's just this nice, clean, linear path, or even better, a
Right.
little
Yeah, the hockey
faster.
stick,
The hockey
everybody is
stick,
hoping
maybe.
for.
Right. It just doesn't work that way. And we've had our ups and our downs and our sideways and every which way. So yeah, so a lot of different things. So one of my memories that I have sales wise, and this is going to lead into why it is that we're doing what we're doing with Accelerate Columbus and our workshop series. Um, One of my early memories was uh, I would say that I was trying to sell a project that just didn't make any sense. I was trying to be everything to everyone. This is
Mm,
also our topic for the day. I want to make sure we focus on when you're evaluating someone's needs, trying to match that up with, are these really the services that we should be offering? We have you seen the 30 for 30 series? Is that the right name? But on ESPN, for their 30th anniversary,
no,
they
but
had
I
this
believe
whole
you.
series. They did a bunch of programs spotlighting famous athletes and teams and moments in sports. And so we bid on this contract with Lewis Howes. Lewis
I do
Howes,
know Lewis,
very popular.
yes.
So back when he was just getting started, he was
That's
getting
cool.
started around the same time as
That's how
me.
far back we go here because
That's
Lewis
right.
Howes is a very influential figure. The School of Greatness is a
Yeah.
really impactful program and platform. So yes.
He's big now. So I guess on the positive side, like I was partnering with Lewis Howes on this, and he wasn't at that time. He wasn't the Lewis Howes that everyone knows now. It was just him in a co-working space, Quirk Co-working in
Mm-hmm.
Gahanna, and he had a space downtown for a little while. Um, but I was bidding on this project that I had absolutely no business bidding on. And there are times when it's right to do that and to try to act bigger than you are, be polished. I am a big fan of transparency and trying to be candid about here's what we have done and here's why I'm confident that we can do this next thing that's much bigger than anything we've done. But way out of my league, spent way too much time on this proposal that I
Mm,
had virtually zero chance of winning. Sometimes, you take a flyer on something like that, but it, we spent a lot of time on it. Nothing came of it. There was no follow on. Well, you didn't get the big project, but you got something else. So that has really shaped how we approach RFPs or these requests
mm,
for proposals, where it's a big project and we're bidding against a whole bunch of other companies. Although I can say just a week, 2 weeks ago, we presented as a finalist for a project that we lost, and uh, horrible failure because I didn't follow my rules of how we respond to RFPs and
mm,
qualify a client's needs. So maybe we can dig in that a little bit more later. So one of the things I want to say as far as what we're doing with Accelerate Columbus, we're doing a website acceleration workshop series. And this is our second year in the program. Last year, we ran three cohorts, three groups of entrepreneurs who wanted to build their own website or had a website and wanted a new website. So what we do, it's a workshop model. So this is not a there are different models with these ESOs who are working at Accelerate Columbus. Some it's basically just a small consulting project. Come to us, you get a project just like a website that we just built for everyone else. With us, it's more of we are going to teach you how to do this yourself. And so I will guide you along the way. I'll help you, but you are going to plan your content. You are going to help select what photos go on there. You're going to do the majority of it. I'll help you. You will be selecting the photos. It is very much a do-it-yourself model with professional support and training. Works great for business owners who either are fairly tech savvy, and right now
Mm,
there this is a tough thing. Like, your time is not yet your scarcest resource. Maybe
mm,
you really want to put more time into your website yourself, rather than, if money is scarce, if you can't invest money in a professional website, you may want to do it yourself. So it's a really great workshop series if you'd like to learn more about how a website works, how you would edit a website. So far, we've used all WordPress for websites. I'm open to using some other platforms, but
okay.
WordPress is by far the most popular platform for websites on the internet. So we've leaned into that. There are a lot of
Mhm.
resources available for it. But we're trying to help businesses to have a great presence online, so that when you are clearly presenting, if I had a website that I could send ESPN to and say, this represents my brand, you don't need to talk to me. Well, we'll
Mhm.
talk, but you don't need to talk to me. My website tells you who we are, what we do, how we, what we don't do, maybe just as importantly. That's really what I want for the entrepreneurs who are going through our program. I want them to have a web presence that communicates with the passion and the clarity of the business owner, but does it 24/7, does it on a phone when your potential buyer is trying to fall asleep at night and they see your Facebook ad and they go to your website, does it on a desktop computer. That's what we're trying to build for all of our participants.
That, I mean, I love the model, the do-it-yourself model, and the approach as well, because the number of times I have in marketing worked with people who are like, "We need a website, build us a website," and I'm like, "Okay, first let's just slow down, okay? Because like I don't build websites. I can
Yeah,
help you organize and consolidate your content, refine but so many people forget all of that has to come before you have something to put in a
yeah,
container and then make it into something. So I love that. And there's probably for a lot of folks just, as you said, like an educational curve, right?
yeah,
Because as matter as how tech savvy you are, if you haven't dealt with the platform, and the multiple other platforms one has to deal with to consolidate all of that information, it can certainly
right,
become overwhelming. So, kind of having somebody walk you through step by step how to do these things, how to build it from the ground up in some instances, or what you can actually do to refine what you've currently got and transition it into something a bit better is really, I think, like impactful and influential for people to actually get over the hump and complete the thing. Because
right.
there's a lot of undone websites out there on the interwebs of people who got ambitious. They saw a video, they were like, I went to YouTube University, I'm ready,
Yeah,
and nothing of it happens. So, okay,
yeah,
so that's great. So, and I love kind of the also the approach of like just thinking about what your needs are for this website so that it can operate for you
mhm,
without you, right?
yeah,
Because for most
yeah,
people, at least if they're in the B2B space, they come to realize that their website is more of a glamorous looking brochure that they kind of sort of have to have out there as a check mark of legitimacy in
right,
some ways. And so kind
yeah,
of coming to the realization for some folks that like you're going to build this website, it's going to be beautiful, but it's probably not going to be where conversion and sales happen.
right,
And
yeah,
that's the
very possibly.
conversation I've had with a lot of people, which is how I got to smashing your sales goals because so many folks were like, all right, we're ready for new branding. We can't wait to see what sales are going to come from that. And I was like, ooh, so hold on a second now here. We're just
Yeah,
talking about
these are
what
not.
we do. Uh, we're
Yeah,
we're not actually talking to any people here. So we've got to like temper our expectations.
yeah,
Which is when I realized, and I think a lot of business owners realize that like you put together a business plan, you put together a website, you figure out what your products and services are, but nobody sort of tells you how you then connect that to an actual customer and then how
right,
you go about the process of right qualifying this individual. So when we're talking
right,
about, understanding customer needs, that's really what it is like what are the steps that you are going through to understand if this is a prospect, where they might be in their decision making journey, where they sit with your products and services, what your pitch opportunities may or may not be. And then, kind of as we started, you're talking about, conversation to conversation, realizing and recognizing that what you have to offer may not necessarily be what it is that that customer or client needs. And so, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about your process of qualifying customers and how you come to the realization that what you have is something that they need and can
Yeah.
utilize, or what you have is not, and how that conversation may look.
Yeah, good question. So I mean, even in what I just talked about with our website acceleration workshop series, part of Accelerate Columbus, it's important to me to communicate that if you are the kind of person that you're in your stage of your entrepreneurial journey where you don't have the money to buy a website. If you have money to pay a professional, that may be a great way to go, because if you have that money and your time is more valuable used selling your product directly, building the product, building your service up, that's someone who's not right for us. So in communicating that, I'm trying to make sure it's clear. If you are at a stage where you would like to pay for a professional website and you want to use your valuable time to do other things, building the business, not the website, this is not for you. That's one example of how I think it's important to communicate what it is that we do and what it is that we don't do, or who we do our work for and who do we not do it for. Because if I trying to think of an example, maybe you go to a car dealership and you're looking at cars. If the car salesman has the mindset that, Erica, you're going to buy a car before you leave this lot. Like no matter what you tell me about your needs, before I've even talked with you, no matter what you tell me about your needs, I know I have the product for you here. 100%. I am sure I'm going to keep you here until you buy a car. Are you going to, is that like welcoming? Does it feel like they understand you?
Right, right.
They haven't even talked to you yet, and they already know that they're perfect for you. Or maybe you've gone on a date where it's that. I mean, my dating, well, I'm celebrating 20 years with my wife now, so my dating life is way in the past. But you think about like going on a date, if someone comes to that date just so confident that you're going to be their spouse, like this is going to work. Like we haven't even talked yet, but like that is very off-putting. Like,
Well, and
wait a
those are the
second.
kinds of sales tactics that make
Yeah,
people both like recoil from
yeah,
a practitioner standpoint, but also then from a customer standpoint. Because as you said, if you have convinced yourself that this is what's going to happen with this
right.
particular customer or client, regardless of what they say do, like you are operating from a space that does not take into consideration what that customer or client wants. And people see
Yeah,
that and sense that and feel that like right
yeah.
away.
Yeah. So that, I mean, that exactly what you said. They're understanding what they want, understanding what they need. And your customer may not always know exactly what they need.
Mm,
So sometimes asking questions and digging deeper into their needs is important. So my approach, what I like to do with clients is I first like to better understand the client. Tell me about why you got into the business that you're in. And usually we're not selling to a business owner. In this workshop series, most of our clients, our participants are business owners. But with the projects that we do, typically it's larger organizations, and we're selling to a marketing director or maybe an IT director on the web app, the mobile app project. So trying to understand, how is it that you came to the position that you're in, and tell me more about your company and your mission and vision and values. What are those things that drive your culture? What's really successful for you? Where do you find your absolute best projects or best customers or clients? Trying to understand those things, that helps me have a greater appreciation for who they are and what they're bringing to this conversation, what mindset they're in when they're talking to me. Clients who just want to come in and say, I need a website. Here's a PowerPoint presentation. This is what I want. Will you just turn this PowerPoint into a website that needs to be mobile, responsive, and friendly, but make it look just like it? That's not a good fit. We need to have a conversation first. So trying to have some empathy, understand the client, put yourself in their shoes. That's a really good first step. And I would say maybe most importantly, as you're having that conversation, it needs to be out of an authentic desire to get to know the person and to want to help them, to want to help move them along in their process. I'm not, I don't know, you've probably gone through some formal sales training in your past, right, Erica? Have you
um,
ever had,
yeah,
or you may
somewhere
have
along the
just
lines.
somewhere along the line? I mean, you've been trained in companies and I don't typically like formal sales training where they give you this spiel that, when you go into a conversation, your goal is to get an next appointment. Like when you make a phone cold call, your goal is to get an appointment to talk to them. And then in the appointment, the goal is to get them to say yes to a proposal. And then you get the proposal in front of them. The goal is to get them to sign the proposal. It's always just pushing for a yes, pushing, pushing, pushing for a yes. Similar to the scenarios where I talked about before, you just presume that you're going to have the product or service that they need. My goal in a conversation when I talk to someone about, they think they need a website or a web app, they've identified some process in their business that's inefficient, two systems that aren't talking together, and they have some concept of what they need. I want to help move them along. I want to get them closer to their goal. For all of us, I think sales really is the goal for all businesses and organizations. But sometimes that sale looks like a donation, or it looks like a new
Hmm.
member for your organization, or a new volunteer, or with some of the projects we do, that sale or that conversion is someone who has something on their criminal record. We have built a portal that helps them get their records sealed. So a conversion for us or that sale is convincing them that we're trustworthy enough that they should follow our process, connect them up with free legal services, and they can get their records sealed and hopefully enhance their ability to get a job and get a loan and all those sort of things. So understanding what is that next step for someone, how can I move them along in that journey? That is my goal in a sales conversation. It is not to close the sale, to get the next meeting, to get the proposal. If I can help you by referring you to a competitor, I have done that sometimes to my detriment, but that's the right thing. If I'm not the right fit, or if they say, "Well, Brad, you're the only one I've talked to," I'll say, "Well, we may be a great fit for you, but you might want to consider, here's a company that is very reputable, but they have a very different approach to us. We are all in-house, 100% W-2 employees. We're in the US. Here's a company that offshores their work. It's a lower price point, but there may be a delay or communication challenges, but there are pros and cons. And so understanding what's going to move my client along in their process. And sometimes they need three bids. And so talking to me, we might be the best option, but giving them two other folks that they could talk to who are actually decent humans who can help them with the same product or service might be the thing to do.
All right,
So
so let me break down some of what you shared because there's a lot of juicy nuggets in there. So first, you kind of gave us three sales processes that depending on the industry, they may be the right processes that make the most sense for you,
sure,
right? Like
absolutely.
when you talk about sort of, the goal is to get to the next thing and to sort of get the proposal signed or get an estimate in front of someone or get the meeting or get the appointment. Like in some industries, that simply makes the best sense,
Mhm.
right? So thinking about like the process that makes the best sense for your industry and for the products and services that you offer. So if you're somebody who is in like a carpet cleaning or, a housekeeping business, it may make really good sense to first get the person, on the phone, then get them an estimate, and then try and schedule the appointment to get out to the
Mhm.
place because those are the steps that need to happen, and anything else sort of may not necessarily play into that. And then also thinking about sort of the sales process approach where as the salesperson potentially have convinced yourself. But again, depending on where people are in their buying process, they may have already decided, like, I am going to buy something based on what it is that my needs are and my timeline and whatnot. And so you're either the right fit or you're not the right fit, right? And sort of knowing up front, like what your goals are and what your purpose are as a salesperson may also kind of be a process. So thinking about the process that number one is going to make the best sense for the customers or clients that you're working with, what their timeline and process might look like. But the other thing that I really like about your process is really sort of this interview that you go through, and also some of the education learning curve. Because if you have a product or service that is more complicated, or that your customer or client they know enough to be dangerous and be able
Mhm.
to kind of talk to you suitably, like they know what they're talking about. But as you kind of go along in the conversation, you can quickly realize, okay, this person knows enough. They've done some Google searches, but I'm going to have to kind of educate them a little bit more in order for them to feel probably in a space where they can make a decision or where they can actually compare across
Mhm.
different proposals or estimates as well. So I kind of love that interview process because I think sometimes people feel like they're bothering their prospect by asking so many questions, or they feel like the prospect is annoyed by the number of questions that they're asking, and typically they're very happy that you're asking the questions because they're like, okay, you actually care about what's going on here, you're engaged, you understand, and also kind of in that process, whether they decide to go with you or you make a recommendation to another organization, you're really kind of, again, arming them to make the best decision. Because the last thing you really want is a customer who decides to go with you and then they know that they made a bad decision. They realize that the products and services don't fit. They realize that the price point doesn't work. The timeline isn't, on the timeline that they anticipate, and they become a horrible client. And there's nothing that you can really do to satisfy clients who made a decision that just wasn't in their best interest, besides sometimes just getting out of business with them. So I love that process that you put out there. Now, the learning curve frequently comes when we have customers that will have like vague requirements that sort of
Mhm.
know a little. And I imagine when it comes to technology and applications, depending on where you come in, and then depending on who's a part of that sales process, you can see an evolution and probably in knowledge and understanding. So I'd love to kind of hear, and you're the technical guy, right? Who's
I'm
now,
one of them. Absolutely.
broadened a
Yeah.
lot of their knowledge around some of the business levels. So I'd love to hear you kind of talk about your process to figuring out how much someone knows, and then when you may need to make recommendations about others that may need to come into the process in order to keep things moving.
Yeah, yeah, good question. There definitely was intention behind my decision to do engineering undergrad and then go back to business school. 'Cause it does help me get some perspective on the value of my services or my skills. That it's really building a really great technical solution is only as good as the problem it solves, if it's solving a real problem. So yeah, I think it's important to consider both aspects of that. I'm very technical, but I also want to try to get at what is the underlying need that's going to drive profit for a client, or it's going to give them more impact at a lower cost.
And I
Ultimately,
bring
yeah.
that to bear just because in the sales process, you may not occupy both positions, right?
Right,
And so you
right,
yourself, as the business owner or as the lead salesperson, you just have to recognize sort of where your strengths may be. And so they certainly
absolutely.
can be in the technical and the business, but frequently that's not the case. And so knowing sort of where to supplement that information, I think is really valuable, whether that's additional training for yourself or whether that's bringing another person along with you that can speak in some of the ways that you may not necessarily have that background or ease.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a very, very important part of it, to understand what are your skills, what knowledge do you have, and then bring someone else. Our vice president of growth and strategic engagement, she is not an engineer, and so she leads up business development for us. But she will bring me along, or she'll bring one of our engineers along. On our marketing site, she'll bring a content strategist. So knowing when that right time to bring someone in, that is definitely important. So you asked me about how do we ask the right questions, understand someone's needs. Understanding our business, I think, is important as well. I think you brought up a good point, Erica, about how in our business, our sales process might be what feels right. In some other businesses, there's a slightly different sales process. So to give some context, in my business, we work primarily on referral. New clients have seen our work before, and they got a recommendation to talk with us, or I meet them at an event and they already have a somewhat of a relationship with me before we talk about a project. And that works well for us. So knowing also that our work is largely custom, we do custom software development, but we build on top of open source frameworks. So we use very popular software like WordPress, or we use PHP as one of our primary programming languages, JavaScript. We use a lot of open source components that are free and available, as opposed to working within the Microsoft ecosystem that tends to be more closed, maybe technically open source, but Microsoft is more closed, or Salesforce is a proprietary ecosystem. So those are a little bit important for you to know. And sometimes that the reason I bring those up is because it's important for listeners to know. You know, you have been exposed to some of this stuff with us as we talk with clients together, uh, because each business is a little bit different. So when I ask questions of a client, I need to ask them questions that help me understand their underlying need, their underlying purpose first, and then understand that a lot of sales training will teach you about pain points. What is the pain that they're feeling? Some people don't like talking. I don't love that terminology of pain, but understanding, is there a problem you're solving or an inefficiency that you're improving, you're eliminating? Trying to understand that is, I think, very important. So asking them, tell me, what is the current way that you're handling this situation? That can be kind of vague. So what is the, for us, I'll give you the example from us. Tell me about your current website. Who built your current website? How long have you had it? What's working really well? What's not working as well? If it worked incredibly well for you, what would it do? What would it do differently? How might you measure a successful website? Some of those questions, and you can apply those to whatever other industry you might be in. Tell me how you're currently solving this problem or how you're currently addressing it. How is that working for you? What's going well? What's not going as well? If it were just insanely successful, or you're talking with us, you probably want a new website or you need a new piece of software built. If it were wildly successful and the software works incredibly well for you, what would that change about your business? What would that unlock in growth or in efficiency? And trying to understand, what will it do for them? And that does a couple things for us. Number one, it helps us to know, do they have a problem that we can actually solve for them? Or are they going to tell us that their main problem is some niche integration with a system that we don't work with? Or their main problem, when we talk to them, they say, you know what, our website, it just doesn't look good. And we say, okay, well, tell me more about that. Well, our logo is horrendous. I'm like, well, we don't specialize in logo design. So maybe we first need to talk about branding. And you should look at the branding first before you get into it. So trying to understand, what is the actual problem that they think they have, and then what problem would we solve by applying our tools? What products or services might we apply, and what would we solve? So that's some of the questions. That getting at the questioning
Yeah,
and our
no,
approach
the
to
one
it.
of the things that I really like from that, and I feel like this is so important, is really asking people to imagine, if you solved this problem, what would it mean to your business?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people think, again, they think they know what the problem is. But when
Yeah.
you start digging in and asking them what's the actual problem, like where are you seeing that things are not working or inefficiencies are happening, or the handoffs aren't going the way that you imagine. But then when you imagine solving this problem, what does that mean for your business? Because it really then puts it into perspective for the client or the customer as to what
Yeah.
they're trying to actually do. And in some instances, it's how you get to the emotional factors that may be going into the decision, because we all
Yeah.
know, like, especially when it, or maybe we don't all know, but frequently, there's people tell you, oh, we're not buying because of money, or we're not buying because of timeline, or we're not buying because, we're still evaluating or doing research. And some of those may be true, but I've been in situations where, there's an emotional issue that's holding people back from actually pulling the trigger and making a decision, even though they know that they have everything that they need to
Yeah.
make a decision. And so, kind of, again, like digging around and getting a better sense of, like, what's the biggest of big picture? What does it look like when this problem is solved? And, like, even more so, what's that going to mean for your business in terms of growth, in terms of sustainability, in terms of, like, what's next? And I feel like
Right.
that's where people start actually, like, you start getting the real goods of
Yeah.
what you need to know to kind of like figure out what's next with this
Yeah.
prospect.
Yeah. I like that, thinking about like the future. How is the business different? I also, you were starting to talk about emotion, like some of the emotional decision making factors. I love asking clients, a couple different questions so that hopefully some of the listeners can pull from different questions and make those sales interviews their own. I like asking if let's presume for a second that you'd like to grow to 10 times your size, have 10 times the impact you're currently having. That might sound a little bit far out, like that there's no way we could possibly do that. Why is that? What is keeping you from going to 10 times your current size? You say, and sometimes the client will say, oh, well, obviously, like if we grew to 10 times our current size and 10 times the sales, we don't have the capacity to deliver on that. Okay, now we've got a capacity issue. It's not the sales issue. Or they'd say, well, I have no idea where we would find the leads. How would we possibly find enough people to grow to 10 times their size? There's no way we're going to get the sales. That's a sales problem. So it starts to, if you take it out of just what do you need today and tomorrow and next week and next month, and take it to what if you're 10 times this size? That can be helpful. I also sometimes will ask, what happens if this problem is not solved? What if you don't have a new website a year
Mm,
from now? What's that going to do to your business? They might say, "Oh my gosh, we are losing sales every day because there's just no way to purchase on our website. If we don't have it in a year, we might be out of business by then." They'll say, "Oh, you said you don't have a way to purchase from the website. So maybe that's the thing." And so that's
mm-hmm.
another way if you say, what happens if this problem is not solved? It can also be a way, do you follow Donald Miller and Story Brand?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I feel like we may have talked about this before. I love his model, Story Brand, and understanding. There's a portion in the Story Brand journey where you talk about if you use us as your guide, you are the hero of the story, and we're going to
Mm-hmm.
help you guide you to success. And if we guide you to success, here's what that promised land could look like. If you don't take this path, what do you think might happen? And get them to sort of draw out what are some of these, don't dwell on it too long, but what are these darker outcomes that if this is not successful, what could that mean for your business? And so that could be interesting to pursue and just say, if this is wildly successful, what impact will that have?
Absolutely. No, I think it's actually really important to take clients basically on that thought experiment. Because
Yeah.
as you said, frequently people, regardless of where they may sit in the organization or the operation, they're thinking about the most immediate things that are happening
Mhm. Yeah.
and what they have to take care of, 10 minutes from now, what fire needs to be put out, what's happening next week. Maybe they're thinking about the quarter or the year if you're lucky, but that's not always the case. So taking them on
Yeah.
that thought experiment to say like, what does it look like to be here and go here? And then what does it look like to be here and do the same thing that you're doing right now? Because a lot of
Yeah.
times people have not kind of thought those things through. And also from a, value trusted advisor, right? You're giving people the space to actually kind of have those ideas that's safe and that has very few consequences, immediately, right? But they can think about what those consequences might look like. And again, I think that's just another way to empower customers and clients to make the best decision for them based on like what their needs are, but like giving them
Yeah.
that space and capacity to do that. Now, okay, as much as we love to give that space and capacity, though, from a sales perspective, that can also be challenging, especially when you're a service-based business, right? So
Mhm.
how do you kind of manage or mitigate that discovery in the sales process versus that discovery once you have closed the deal and you're actually kicking off a project? How do you mitigate that?
It's a good question. I have this conversation with my team frequently that you can have a lot of conversation up front in a sales process. And I would argue that regardless of how much you try to specify all the details of a project, there will be misunderstandings, there will be disagreements later on in the project. Clients will, I mean, when you get something custom made or you're paying for something, paying a fair amount for something, investing in something, you want it to be perfect. And you're going to keep asking for more as a responsible consumer. You're going to keep asking for more for your money until you're told no, until a limit is put on you. So I don't blame our clients for continually asking for more and more and more and saying, oh, now that I see that's not quite what I want. We need to put some boundaries on it.
Hmm.
So my argument would be that regardless of how much you try and specify upfront, that will still happen down the road. So if we do less of the specifying up front, we do enough to make sure that the client's making the right decision, that we are the right fit for them. We should be working together. Our process, our culture, our core values align with them. As long as we can get that worked out and we can work within their budget and it fits, it's a similar budget and structure to what we've done with other clients, I would like to move forward. So let's figure out, how do we move forward on at least some small scope to get started before trying to scope everything out in fine detail. And there's a whole segment of my logic on that applies to software and the lean startup methodology, that the worst kind of waste in a software company is building functionality that no one will ever use or pay for. And with a lot of clients, you could apply the same thing to content. Writing content that no one will ever read, like that would not be
Absolutely.
good. Or doing work, that adding a feature to a product that no one will ever want to use or they won't pay more for. So I'd like to try and find what is a scope where we could get started working together and we can deliver real value, and that can build trust, and then that can help us to win even more. So we work on a very agile process to keep specifying. Every 2 weeks we define our deliverables. At the end of the 2 weeks we deliver those, show you here is the actual work that we told you we would do 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then we work on what is the next 2 weeks of work. So that sort of a sprint structure is the way that we approach reducing risk for the client and also reducing risk for us, that we
Well,
would be aligned.
there's a good moral to that story, which is if you're doing anything custom, you always already run the risk of not fully meeting your client's expectations because they don't have them fully realized in a
Yeah.
way that could possibly be communicated to you, right? It's like the Supreme Court's like definition of porn, right? You know it when you see it.
No
And
one's, yeah.
frequently, when it comes to certain kinds of custom services, the
Yeah.
client has no idea they really have no idea what you're going to come up with. Like they really don't.
Right.
Like you can show them the mock-ups, you can show them like the site maps, you can show them all of the things, but until it is literally live on a thing that they can now interact with, it doesn't really matter. And that's
Right.
that's been my experience with like
Yeah.
content development, is like I can tell people here's the outline, here's what it's going to look like, here's what we're going to say, but until it is literally right in their face, they really don't know. And that's to no one else's
Yeah.
fault, right? Like that's why we are the business owners, because we can see the vision that you are kind of describing to us, but kind of
Yeah.
already accepting the fact that they're not going to fully know that what you have delivered it is exactly what they wanted, because they didn't fully know what they wanted to begin
Right.
with. And you're putting something into existence that may not have existed before. So you don't always have a whole bunch of examples or exemplars. You're, in some instances,
Yeah.
Frankensteining like what they said they liked over here and what they said they liked over there, and like trying to sort of bring those things together. So I think that's always like a very good
Yeah.
reminder for people, is that they're not going to know what it is, especially when we start talking about custom services or products. But then
Yeah.
also thinking about, you know, um, they're not going to know what they want. There was something else that was really profound that came out of that. Can't remember, but
I
that's
mean,
okay.
so I don't know if this may or may not be anywhere near where you're going, but
Go ahead.
some clients don't know the right questions to ask. So sometimes helping them to know what things, here are some things that you might want to know about us, or here's some questions you might want to be asking in this process. I sometimes like to do that. Like, here are some
Oh yeah.
differences that how we might be different from your other alternatives. One lesson, a very important lesson that I learned recently on this project that we lost. We were a finalist for the project and we lost it. I should have asked some specific questions. A lot of times in a sales process, I find that I or others on my team hesitate to ask a question. Well, they're not going to tell me who the other finalists are, or they've already seen the other proposals. We were chosen as a finalist. They wouldn't tell me what the prices are for the other proposals, or they wouldn't tell me what platforms they're proposing building the website. I make all these assumptions.
Mm.
Well, get to the final presentation and found out the other people asked and they got information and they used that information in the presentation. And it also, aside from just the strategy of being able to use it in a presentation, why not just ask who else, who may I ask who else you're considering? Or I will frequently ask, what other types of companies are you considering? Are they all companies of 16 people who are fully remote with designers, developers, and content strategists all on one team? Or are you looking at teams of freelancers? So asking some questions to
Mm.
understand what other alternatives are they considering, I think can be really valuable. That's a part for me of assessing their needs, is assessing who the competition would be.
Absolutely, right? We always want to know who the competitors are, not just in our marketer industry, but also like in directly as we're talking to clients. But I was thinking
Yeah.
about mitigating that sort of sales process discovery with kind of like the post project or the
Yeah.
project
Right.
start. And so one of the things that I thought was also really impactful, in addition to kind of realizing that you're always already going to have that gulf, especially when we're talking about custom solutions, but also kind of drawing clear boundaries
Mhm.
was one of the things that I heard you say. And like, I hate to even admit this, but I worked with this organization and this person, like, it made me so uncomfortable. It's one of the reasons why I quit because they would be like kind of like a discovery like hound, and they would bring in multiple businesses to kind of do their discovery process or to kind of do like their free analysis or assessment of
Mhm.
X, Y, and Z, and then rather than kind of make a decision amongst like the three or four organizations that they brought in, they would then kind of take that information and then just implement it themselves, or give it
Yeah.
to whomever that they had already decided was going to be doing the work, and they've sort of done the research to determine like what work they now want them to
Yeah.
do, right? And so it can be difficult for service providers, I think, particularly, to know how to mitigate that and where to draw the boundaries. And so I think
Yeah.
number one, knowing that there's going to be a gulf between like what you've told them, what they want, and what actually gets delivered. And that part of your job as the business owner is to continue to mitigate that gulf by setting expectations that are
Yeah.
reasonable, and then also saying no, right?
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
things start going out of the, even if it's out of the scope of what we do for an introductory X, right? Like
Yeah.
it's introductory. It's intended to pay itself back some point in the process.
Right.
And so being able to kind of say, you know what, that's not something that we do for an introductory, but here's where we do that and here's how we do that, and kind of having that conversation. But I think drawing the boundaries as to
Yeah.
what happens in the sales process and what happens like when you are actually kind of post project and you've kind of closed the deal,
Yeah.
I think is super important, especially for service providers and folks that are like newer, where that's like you really want the sale. And if
Yeah.
desperation is driving you, you'll do a lot of stuff, right? And a lot of times people can
Right.
smell that desperation and they will go ahead and leverage it to
Right.
their benefit.
I've had
Um,
multiple friends stop running their businesses, exit their businesses, go get jobs elsewhere, send projects our way saying, Brad, just please help me. Like this project is off the rails. It's way over scope. It is really hard to set those boundaries and to run a business that's profitable. So that is definitely a big concern.
it
Uh,
is. It is.
yeah.
It's taken me a long time to get to the point where I have like
Yeah.
okay, I'll say okay boundaries.
Yeah.
But okay, so you know what? We are drilling down to the end of our conversation. This has been great. I have a rapid fire round for you. So I've got five
Great.
rapid fire questions. This is just your gut instincts, okay?
All
Don't think
right.
too hard about them. Okay. So what is the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning?
Check my phone, of course. I'm a technology
Oh,
guy. I check my phone.
there's so many bad reports about
Um,
that, but we are not going to go
I
into
mean,
it.
first I try to get my daughter to wake up because usually I'm about to drive her to school and I need to give her maybe 5 or 6 or 7. Okay, it's time to get up before she actually gets up. So maybe it's that, and then I'll go check my phone.
Yes, the
Yeah,
gut instinct revision is always
right,
very useful. Love that. Okay.
right, yeah.
I think I know the answer to this one. What's more important, closing the sale or building a relationship?
Oh, the relationship for sure. I always want to deliver value. Can I deliver some sort of value to them? And that's going to help build a relationship. It may not close the sale.
Okay, all right. Number three, would you rather have 10 leads with high potential or 100 leads with low potential?
I'm going to go with the 10 personally. I mean,
Absolutely.
if you know the math and you say, well, I've got a 20% conversion rate on cold leads, well, then maybe go for the 100. But I don't know. I would every day, I would take the warm, high quality leads.
Well, you know what? And again, though, this is one of the key distinctions, just kind of based on people's different business models, right?
Yeah.
Because some
Yeah.
people are in the
Absolutely.
volume business and they're like, no,
Right.
I'll take 100 leads because as you said, I've got a 25% conversion rate. If I only go with
Yeah.
10, 25% fewer opportunities.
Right.
Okay. Number four, what's your biggest sales strength, would you say?
Uh, well, so I mean, I think honestly, authenticity is probably one of them that I genuinely care more about helping someone, helping them to learn, helping them to gather all the information they need to grow than I do closing a sale. And I think that is really helpful. Technically speaking, like so having a technical background and then also a business background, that is extremely helpful to me in my business because we are building highly technical solutions. I don't know design and content, so we have people who know those better than I do. But that I feel like that's a strong option. If I know my product really well, I know how to build it, and I can understand the business and I can ask questions about how what drives their business, that's a really helpful combination. So I think that's
I
also
think that's a
helpful.
good recommendation because there's a lot of people who start businesses because they're like, I know how to do a thing better in the world,
Yeah.
which is true, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, if not, we wouldn't have a lot of things, but it's learning the business of how to
Right.
actually like monetize and sustainably keep that thing in the world,
Yeah.
is sometimes the harder part for a lot of people. I
Absolutely.
know that's something that for me, I've spent a lot of time just like learning business. I have a PhD in marketing and communications. They don't really
Yeah.
teach a whole lot of business out there. So,
Right.
figuring out the technical as well as the business side, I think is a great
Yeah.
strength.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the last rapid fire question. If a client asks for a discount, how do you respond?
So the scope has got to decrease. If they want a discount, that's fine, but the scope has to go down. That's my rule. Like I won't negotiate on price unless we're also negotiating on scope. If we can cut the size of the project down, then great.
I
So it's
think
not really a
that
discount at that
it's
point.
not. I think what you've said to the client is here's how you can discount your
Yes.
services.
Right, right. No, I mean, if it's not the right fit, it's not the right fit. And I believe wholeheartedly in the work that we do. If I didn't believe in it, I'd be happy to give a discount and say, you know what? Yeah, it's not worth what I was just asking you to pay for it. I will cut the price for you. That's
Well,
showing a
the other
discipline from
thing
a
is
product.
also like if you have provided a discount, right? Like if you've
Yeah,
bundled some services or if you have like given some hour bonuses, because you're like, okay, we're going to work on this until it's like done, regardless.
yeah,
Making that information transparent is
hmm
incredibly useful and valuable for
yeah,
customers and clients because you may have already done that. They just don't know. So
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
putting that information
Right.
out there, right?
You better get credit for giving him a discount if you did.
That's all I'm
'Cause,
saying is like
yeah,
get
I'm
your
with you on
credit
that
for that discount if you did something because you were like a
for
nice
sure.
person or you recognized like there was a good opportunity there.
My team all day long is going to go above and beyond on projects. I'll say, hey, did you let the client know that you went above and beyond? Like, well, no, I don't want them to know how much effort I put in. Why not? Like, you're not going to, you want them to know how much you care. So it's similar with the discount. If you give them a discount, make sure you tell them you gave them a discount.
Absolutely. Well, that's really like the humble brag, right, of
Yeah,
Ohioans frequently is like, well, I don't want them to know I went through all this like extra effort. And you're like,
you're super
but
nice. Just tell
right,
them.
like, but that's how we make our money. That's how we keep the
Yeah,
referrals coming in is people think,
yeah,
knowing the extra effort that we put in.
right.
Okay, this conversation has been amazing, Brad. I have had such a good time.
Thanks,
It's such a
Erica.
great treat. Please, if people are interested in learning more about Buckeye Innovation or learning more about you, what's the best way that they can do that?
Sure, you can go to buckeyeinnovation.com. It's a good source. We're on Instagram and on X and Facebook, so feel free to find us there. You can email me, Brad at buckeyeinnovation.com as well. I'd love to have a conversation, learn more about your entrepreneurial journey or the business and organization you're in.
All right, fabulous. Well, thank you so much. This has been another episode of Sales Tuesday podcast. So glad that you were here with us today, Brad. Thank you everyone for joining, and we'll see you at the next training.